And my reflections today will be on environmental politics of infrastructure. And I'm an anthropologist studying large hydroenergy dams in Turkey, focusing on analyzing the centrality of infrastructure and ecology, their interplay to the making of state power, expert politics, and rural futures. In contrast to their technopolitical representation as infrastructures that tame and conquer nature, dams are actually environmentally entangled infrastructures. Hence, their design, construction, and maintenance are always shaped by non-human forces as well as human practices. One of the pieces that has shown this was Timothy Mitchell's well-known piece, of course, Can the Mosquito Speak? That traced the interconnections between the Aswan Dam, war, disease, and chemicals, showcasing the need to bring in non-humans into our analysis, not actually as autonomous forces independent of social and political processes, but as co-constituents. In Turkey, technical experts and state actors have long approached dams as more than technical infrastructures. So they recognize the environmental aspects of these infrastructures, and they more and more increasingly integrate nature restoration projects into dam building. And in that context, I specifically critically analyze the everyday practices of state engineers in controlling reservoir sedimentation through erosion control, and in salvaging and saving endemic and rare plants before they submerge under dam waters. And I ask, what kinds of politics are these environmental practices infrastructural for? In other words, what forms of political power and ecological life do they enable and facilitate? In a couple of minutes towards the end, I will come back to this question, but I also want to kind of situate my work within the larger infrastructural turn in MENA. So, and the new lenses these studies provide for understanding ecologies of and as infrastructure. If political underpinnings and implications of construction and everyday use of infrastructures in the region have been significant topics of study, their destruction and dismantling are other emerging topics, especially under conditions of war and violence. As Erika Weinthal and Jeannie Sowers show, protracted conflict and prolonged occupation in different contexts across the MENA target environmental infrastructures such as water, food, and energy, and result in a form of slow violence in which the adverse impacts of destruction accumulate over time. And Lale's talk has very well illuminated that as well. As we are talking today, in fact, the targeted destruction of environmental and health infrastructure in Gaza, Palestine, by the State of Israel continues as the key brutal pillar of ongoing genocidal violence, leading to the complete ruination of the material conditions of life. But the politics of infrastructure studies in the MENA region has also showed that our analysis should not and cannot stop at points of destruction and war. Among such new recent works, for example, are Munira Hayat's book, A Landscape of War, that reveals, quoting from her, the vitalizing more than human relations that persist and make life amidst returning seasons of devastation, end of quote. And in South Lebanon, for example, in her work, tobacco cultivation and goat herding constitute what she calls survival collectives, which are infrastructural to the sustenance of life amidst ruination. To understand similar resistant ecologies in Palestine, sociologist Manal Shakir develops the term ecosmooth, which explains ecological practices of steadfastness, aiming maintain attachment to land and fighting back against the settler colonial destruction of this attachment. So in doing so, these works propose moving beyond infrastructural ruins in the region by paying attention to everyday practices of making livable worlds. As my work shows, however, restoring life amidst ruination or in the aftermath of ruination is also a governmental practice, which is infrastructural to maintenance of power, hierarchies, and injustices. In making this point, I build upon existing scholarly works in the region, and to name a few, for example, historian Diana Davis showed the key role of environmental restoration discourses in the colonization of Africa, Geographer Iris Braverman her work illustrates how Israeli settler colonialism employs claims of greening the landscape while simultaneously destroying Palestinian ecologies. Also, in addition to these works, the claims of making livable future by state and corporate actors more recently materialized through the construction of renewable energy infrastructures in the Arab Gulf, as explored by Gökçe Günal's book, Spaceship in the Desert, or more region-wide initiatives of climate change mitigation, such as Middle East Green Initiative led by Saudi Arabia that entails massive tree plantation schemes and green energy infrastructures. So drawing on these works, before concluding, let me come back to my own research and the question I posed in the beginning: what kinds of politics these environmental practices, their incorporation to dam building is infrastructural for, what kind of power and politics they enable and facilitate. I will briefly address this question by taking you to Çoruh Valley in northeastern Turkey, which is the borderlands with Georgia, where I conduct my fieldwork. And Çoruh Valley was once a deep valley with a Mediterranean microclimate shaped by fierce flow of the river through steep mountains, and now it has become a construction zone for 10 consecutive dams. In this valley, the botany professors and state foresters initiated Turkey's first project of salvaging endemic and rare plants before their inundation. So this project marked the first instance where resettlement and relocation caused by dams, typically focused on local communities and archaeological sites, have extended to encompass plant life, and was then followed by salvaging of also local fruit trees and fertile soils to locations above the reservoir elevation. So in early 2000s, when the proposed large hydroenergy dams began in the valley, the implementers of these salvage projects became concerned about the anticipated negative impacts of the reservoirs. According to them, large dams were inevitable mega projects that would have unavoidable sacrifices, but they believed these sacrifices could be compensated by relocating endangered plant species to make them thrive in the aftermath of ruination. So environmental destruction, therefore, was no more rendered invisible nor denied by the proponents of proliferating mega infrastructure projects that Dalia has also talked about. Instead, these actors acted upon destruction with the aim of not preventing it, but redeeming as much nature as possible out of the process of what they cast as inevitable destruction. In the Çoruh Valley, the act of making ecological life possible in the aftermath of submergence is therefore a governmental endeavor that creates what I term movable nature. As state-sanctioned experts and local government representatives, the salvagers presented themselves as the only actors who could have the power, authority, knowledge, and resources to mitigate damage and allow the continuation of life in the valley by making nature into a movable asset. The salvage project, in addition to producing categories such as endangered plants deemed worthy of rescue, enacted the power of salvagers through performances of expert authority and served as a governmental tool to legitimize further destructive projects. Once established as a mitigation strategy, the practice of rendering nature movable circulates across various infrastructure and extraction projects, facilitating the expansion of the very environmental damage it claims to mitigate. For example, one example of that instance of facilitation of further damage was in 2015, when after the longest lasting anti-mining resistance in the Çoruh Valley, the administrative court annulled the favorable environmental impact assessment report for the copper mine, and due to its negative impacts. And what happened afterwards, after that annulment, subsequently the company obtained a revised environmental impact report with a new proposal to relocate the endemic plants, hence ensuring the approval by the court, and the mine is now under operation. Therefore, what I show in my work is that the circulation of environmental salvage practices creates the conditions for further ruination caused by proliferating infrastructure and extraction projects, not despite, but because of mitigation efforts. And I will stop here, looking forward to the discussion in Q&A.